Have you ever walked into a room and felt like everyone was tuned to a frequency you couldn't hear? Not because you're broken, but because you're awake. You listen differently. You observe more than you speak. You don't laugh just because others are laughing. And slowly, without warning, you begin to feel like a stranger in your own life. Today's message isn't for the average mind. It's for the few who are beginning to question everything. Why do people perform socially? Why does every conversation feel like a script? Why do I feel alone, even when I'm surrounded? Schopenhauer, the philosopher most feared for telling the raw truth, once said, "The more intelligent a man is, the more he is inclined to solitude." Because awareness isn't a comfort. It's a confrontation. You start to see the masks. How people behave not to express themselves, but to survive approval, applause, and attention. You begin to wonder, how many times have I laughed to be polite? How many times have I silenced my thoughts just to be accepted? We trade our authenticity for belonging. We perform to avoid rejection. But what is the price of this performance? A life that's never truly yours. The truth is brutal. The deeper your insight, the more shallow the world starts to feel. It's not arrogance. It's clarity. You start noticing the disconnect. How every compliment feels hollow. How every interaction drains more than it gives. And then, the silence begins. Not around you, but within. You don't want to be rude. But you also don't want to be fake. And that conflict isolates you. But here's where Schopenhauer's harsh truth becomes a gift. Solitude isn't punishment. It's revelation. The more you withdraw from shallow noise, the more you discover your own signal. Your thoughts begin to sharpen. Your emotions stabilize. Your creativity returns. The loneliness you feared was the doorway to your inner world. This is not about hating people. It's about no longer needing them to validate your existence. It's about choosing depth over noise, silence over performance, clarity over comfort. And with time, a strange shift happens. You begin to stand out without trying. You don't chase attention, but you get it anyway. Not because you're loud, but because you're real. Your authenticity becomes magnetic. Your stillness becomes strength. And your solitude becomes strategy. Ask yourself, what if the silence you fear is where your power lives? We live in an age where everyone is talking, but few are saying anything. Where connection is constant, but intimacy is rare. Everyone wants to be heard, but no one is truly listening. That's why your quiet rebellion matters. When you stop performing, you start becoming. You begin filtering your world. Not every room deserves your presence. Not every conversation deserves your energy. And not every connection is worth the cost of losing yourself. You don't need to disappear. You just need to stop explaining your soul to those who only see surfaces. When you embrace this shift, you start attracting differently. No longer seeking shallow approval. You begin to align with those who see you, truly. Not the mask. Not the performance. But the quiet truth underneath. This path isn't easy. But it is honest. And that's what makes it powerful. History remembers those who chose solitude to build something eternal. Da Vinci. Tesla. Kierkegaard. Not because they were antisocial, but because they were focused. Selective. Deliberate. So let me ask you, what could you build in the silence everyone else avoids? What truth could you discover when you stop chasing the noise? This isn't a rejection of society. It's a reclamation of self. Your time, your focus, your soul deserve better than mindless chatter and empty smiles. The world doesn't need another person performing. It needs someone real. Someone like you. So if this message stirred something inside you, if you're done with the games, done with the noise, Done with trying to fit in where you don't belong? Then write this in the comments. Silence sparks strength. Let that be your signal to others walking the same quiet path. And when they see it, they'll know they're not alone. And neither are you.